Hey everyone, my name is Tim, and today's episode is brought to you by our sponsor, Riverside FM. Riverside is a great solution for all your podcast video and audio recording and editing needs. Ever since I launched this podcast, all of the interview portions of my shows have been produced in Riverside. As a beginner podcaster, one of the things I've always appreciated about Riverside is how easy and intuitive it made it to produce quality video and audio files, even with little experience. I was able to get started pretty quickly and produce my first episode. And it's nice to know there's a ton of learning resources and support there for when you do want to dive deeper. I even used it to record my first lives for YouTube, and it made that easy too. Check out the link in my description and use the code MyTogBlog for a 15% discount. And now, on to the show. So I'm going to go out on a bit of a limb here today and say that I think most content creators begin their journey with the notion of creating content around a topic that they enjoy. And it's only later that they try to develop a business model that can sustain their content creation from a financial perspective. And that's just fine if you're still figuring out what you want to do, or you're approaching content creation as a hobby or a side hustle where you're not dependent upon the income that's being generated. But if you're planning to approach this as a full-time business, the problem with the content-first approach is that it leaves too much up to chance. It leaves it up to chance that your chosen topic is one that aligns with a sufficient market demand to create a full-time business. And it also leaves it up to chance that your skills in that area have at least the potential to meet or exceed or somehow differentiate yourself from the competition. But what if you reversed everything? And instead of trying to build a business model on top of your hobby, you start with a core business idea where you know there's a sizable market and that you know can build upon existing skills that you already have. That, I think, would give you a much higher chance of success as a full-time creator, and that is the approach taken by my guest in today's episode, Jessy Grossman. Jessy is the founder of Women in Influencer Marketing, a community that has over 4,500 members and more than 300 brands associated with it. Jessy is a longtime entrepreneur in digital media, and she's been quoted in the New York Times, Forbes, and in less than 2 years, she created one of the fastest growing influencer talent agencies in the country. And I think she has some great insights to share here about how she built a business that's supported by content creation rather than the other way around. So let's get into it. Hi, Jessy. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining. Could you tell us a little bit about how you got started and what in your journey brought you to where you are today?
Yeah, so it's quite a long, windy road, but I'll spare you all the details. But, I work in the creator economy and in a very niche place. So I have this community called Women in Influencer Marketing. It's
Mhm.
a professional networking organization for all intents and purposes, but it's so
Yeah.
much more than that. I come from a talent management background. I
Mhm.
used to represent influencers and transparently, the reason WIIM
Mm.
even became a thing was just because I was looking to make more deals for my clients and meet more
Yeah.
people to do them with. So WIIM was originally a passion project while I had my
Mhm.
real job, quote
Right.
unquote, where I was a talent manager. And once I ended up selling years later, I ended up selling
Mhm.
my management company. And so it was at that point where I was like, like what to do next? I could
Right.
go work for somebody else again. I could go launch something completely new,
Mm.
or I can give this passion project that I had been working on for a
Right.
few years at that point a real go.
Mhm.
So that was the decision. It was like a very scary one. It was like
Yeah.
at the middle, like not even the middle, like the beginning of the pandemic, more or less. But
Right.
arguably it was when people like sort of needed that community the most. So took a big chance. And that's sort of the origin stories of WIM. So,
Mhm.
yes, now, present day, I do consider myself a content creator to a certain
Mhm.
extent. It's funny because I feel like there are a handful of people who are in like similar lane that
Right.
I'm in. And we all sort of struggle with like how to identify ourselves
Mhm.
because certainly don't feel like a creator in the traditional sense,
Right.
but more in like the thought leader, like the
Mhm.
B2B space feels more fitting. And yeah, I feel just like in the world that we're living in, once we continued to monetize the community and, we do that with sponsorships and we do that with
Yeah.
memberships, it was sort of just a no-brainer that we had to master content. But
Right.
it to in order to grow it. And
Mhm.
so, we are still perfecting what that looks like. For us, it's on the social platforms. Of course, we have like a presence on Instagram, but
Mhm.
I have a bigger presence on LinkedIn and I have a
Right.
bigger presence on our podcast. So,
Mhm.
not all content looks the same. And I think that's something that I've learned where when we first started, I assumed that our biggest platform had to be,
Right.
Instagram or TikTok. And
Mhm.
that's actually like, it's not the most fitting place for where our
Mm.
audience is. So I think
Right.
that was a big lesson learned, which is just produce your best stuff where your audience lives.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the other thing that creators struggle with is that alignment of like, this is my approach to content creation, and this is where I can find my audience. And so, therefore, this is how the business connects to the content. Did you have that all mapped out, or did you kind of? It sounds like maybe more discovered it as you went
Oh,
along.
yeah, definitely not mapped out. I think that's, like, one of the biggest misnomers of business in general is that, like, only the people who went and got an MBA or, like, some sort
Right.
of formal education or basically, like, learned the answers before doing it are the
Right.
ones who are successful. I think that's just not that's never been my experience. My
Yeah.
experience is that, like, the best entrepreneurs especially, they experiment and they learn
Right.
what works for them and what works for their business, and you can learn and pivot from it too.
Hmm.
So we're constantly experimenting when it comes to content, when it comes to running the community broadly. Our business is constantly changing. Like our responsibility is to have a pulse on what our community needs and what they
Hmm.
want. And that can change at any given moment. And so that like
Right.
changes and affects the business. And so while I don't know a ton of businesses quite like mine, I know that there's a
Hmm.
similarity in other businesses too. So that's our experience.
Yeah, and I think that's something that the audience would be particularly interested in is you have developed a monetization model, and how does that work with your business? How do you earn income as a creator?
Yeah. So we are predominantly membership based. We
Mhm.
have a monthly membership and we have a yearly membership. We have right now about 450 members.
Mhm.
And, they pay for access, for education,
Right.
for events. There's a whole lot of things that are included in that
Mhm.
membership, but that's the main way. And then as we've grown, this past year was the first year when we had significant amounts of people who are interested in reaching that community. So once you
Excellent.
build it, then there are people who want to sell to them or speak to them in some
Yeah.
capacity. And that's when we've been just starting to be able to sell in sponsorships at those events,
Right.
whether they're virtual or in person or, on our podcast,
Mhm.
things like that. So it's certainly been a journey and like different revenue streams have opened up as we've grown and sort of like
Yeah.
evolved as an organization. But those are the two primary ways that we
Yeah.
monetize it.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I guess it like kind of like the content model, it wasn't mapped out. It's probably something you discovered along the way or worked through.
Oh, yeah, like, even in terms of what do we charge for the membership? I mean,
Yeah.
that's changed, and we've had to learn,
Mhm.
what does that even look like? We have some people who have been with us since day 1 when we launched the official membership, and that was in
Right.
2020, like, November of 2020,
Mhm.
and those people, rightfully so, are locked into that price because I was
Right.
like, "If you buy in now, your price will never
Right.
increase," and some people pay, I think that price, if I remember correctly, it's around $200 for the year.
Mhm.
So now our annual price is up to $499, but those
Excellent.
people like helped us build what we are today. So they sort of
Yeah.
got we call it grandmothered. We're like a women's
Right.
focused organization versus grandmothered in. And, we've had to experiment like what prices fit.
Mhm.
We're targeting anywhere from people just graduating college to people who are well off in
Right.
their career. Not everybody has the same budget. So,
Mhm.
that's why we launched a student discount. And, that's why we run promotions and just trying
Mhm.
to figure out there's a lot of psychology when it comes to pricing, and so that's something that we've had to learn a lot along the way.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned about the pricing, and I have a few software services that I got in early on, and it's like, I'll never let that go now
Right,
because,
right.
you got in at the early price, and it's then as the business builds, you get so much more value out of it.
100%.
Yeah, it's great that you're able to, continue expanding it and add additional members. And then do you have, like, I guess for lack of a better term, a funnel constructed where it's like people discover you and maybe there's some low ticket offers and then kind of a medium kind of offer. And then the membership, I guess, would be kind of the capstone offer.
So we do. I think, like, I mean, transparently, I always think that what we have can always be improved upon. We have that in a few different capacities. Like, we use our email marketing program that we use. We use
Mm-hmm.
MailerLite. I happen to be a
Right.
big fan of theirs. They have some like funnels and automation sequences and things like that. So when people get into our email system, they sort of like work through a funnel sequence. We
Mm-hmm.
also, for example, we started back in 2017 as a Facebook group.
Okay.
And so we still have people to this day, a lot of
Yeah.
people who apply to be in that Facebook group. And, those are leads, a lot of word of mouth. We also have
Yeah.
our own affiliate program where people who have been
Mm-hmm.
members of WIIM for a year or more are now eligible to be affiliates for us. And so, they're referring people. In
Yeah.
2024, we're going very heavily into lots of different local markets throughout the
Mm-hmm.
country. This year, we held a few very large tentpole events in some major markets like New York,
Right.
LA, and Chicago. But next year, we're getting into some secondary and even some smaller tertiary markets. And when we're in them, our goal is to meet more people and sort of
Mm-hmm.
build up those more local communities and get them to
Right.
want to join because of that additional added value.
Right.
And the people who are our ambassadors in those cities are affiliates for us as
Mhm.
well. So we're kind of like attacking things from
Yeah.
a number of different angles and just seeing which one works best for us.
Love it. Yeah, it reminds me a lot of, like, building the audience on the content creation side. You have multiple channels and people discover you and then hopefully become more engaged, maybe moving from, like, shorter form kind of content to longer form content, and yeah, just bringing the customer along on the buyer journey, as it were. And that's one of the things I think that has been the biggest difference I've noticed with, people starting out in content creation and focusing entirely on that awareness piece, and the, more experienced creators that do incorporate, like, the whole buyer journey and the different parts of it that can, lead to building the business foundation. So, yeah, I appreciate hearing how you're working on that.
I also think it's important to meet people where they are too. Like,
Yeah.
not everybody consumes content in the same way.
Right.
Like, I'm a big podcast consumer. I just love listening to
Mhm.
podcasts, but I also watch some podcasts on YouTube. And I'm a big YouTube consumer. Like, I'm this person who watches YouTube on my television. So, and then some people are like, I would never do that. I'm just scrolling on TikTok or on Instagram all day.
Yeah.
So I think it's a matter of meeting people where they are
Mhm.
in a number of different capacities. Cause I've had people who like tune into our podcast and you can do
Right.
that for free, right? There's
Right.
zero barrier to entry for that. And, we sort of build a relation, like a rapport with each
Mhm.
other as they listen to me talk about God knows what for like an hour every single week. And, that does something to a
Mhm.
person, and the conversions, if that's what we're talking about, monetization, like it does, like sometimes it happens immediately, but it's so rare
Right.
that it does. I think that it's really important and way more common that,
Right.
you nurture those
Mhm.
relationships and, when the time is right, that person sticks, and
Yes.
usually I find that they'll stay a lot longer if that nurturing sort of happens organically and on
Right.
their timeline.
Right. Yeah, I think that's some great advice there. Is there something you wish that you would have known earlier as a business person
It's a good
that you know now?
question. I mean, I can certainly like rattle off a bunch of things, but the broader answer is like, I actually enjoy learning along the
Mhm.
way. I don't know if it's like the masochistic side of myself, but like, I don't really look at things as like failures ever. I
Right.
really genuinely look at them as opportunities to learn and grow. And that's part of what I love about just running my and owning my own business
Mhm.
is that, I don't know, I can like expand all the things that I know and whatever I
Right.
want to learn, I can because I
Yeah.
could just build that side of my business. And so I have fun with it. I
Mhm.
I I think I would miss out on all those opportunities if
Mhm.
I like quote unquote knew, fill in the blank. So
Yeah.
I kind of enjoy the process. And
Mhm.
so that's just me.
That's awesome. I think it's and it kinda relates to my next question, which is like, what is a critical success factor for somebody that wants to be an influencer today?
So to be an influencer, I mean, I think, this is a question that we worked through a lot when I was managing talent, right? Which is
Mhm.
as a talent manager, you're working with influencers who are ultimately their own business owners. They're all entrepreneurs at the end of the day. And being so, they all have very individual needs and
Mm.
very individual goals, right? And
Right.
so I think that, my success might be so different from yours. I think
Mhm.
most influencers would say that, their success comes from the ability to monetize and to really be able to focus
Mhm.
on what they enjoy doing and to be able to, reach a lot of people or at least
Right.
like a meaningful amount of people to make impact.
Mhm.
But you can meet influencers who don't want any of that. And they
Right.
just want, brand deal after brand deal. And like
Right.
they're like, oh, I'll hawk any product. I don't really care because I'm making a lot of money. And
Right.
that's fine. Like I really have no shame in supporting that if that's what they
Mhm.
want to do. But I also think that as a creator, your goals and your desires change over time because as you
Mhm.
sort of reach those certain milestones and you're like, oh my God, I didn't even think I could do that. Well,
Right.
great. I'm here. What's next? I think that's why people like talent managers and,
Mhm.
just having a good team around you can be really helpful because
Right.
the sky is really the limit
Yeah.
when you're a creator because there's so much opportunity out there. And it's great to have that perspective to
Mhm.
know what is realistic? What does that timeline
Right.
look like for when that can be achieved? Like, how can I get there and not take this like circuitous path? And also, like, once I have reached that place where I achieved the goal I wanted like 6 months ago, where I thought it would take 5 years, now I'm here
Yeah.
and what else could I
Right.
do? There's so many different revenue streams. There's so many different ways to build an empire and
Yeah.
it's all really possible. So I think it's also just having the self-awareness to know what's fulfilling to you.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think it is one of the hardest things, when you're a creator is to have that objective insight into what's the next step. And I could see where like a team and talent management could be very helpful because it is difficult to separate yourself and you're kind of like, I don't know, the short-term pulls, I guess, sometimes on on what you could create and kind of a longer term vision, which, the outside perspective is so helpful for, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think like management generally provides like a lot of different things, but I think one of
Mhm.
the most valuable things that people don't really talk about is just that perspective.
Right.
Like they're just privy to so many different conversations and
Mhm.
so much knowledge and can just give you that outside educated
Yeah.
opinion. And I think that is like so, so, so valuable for
Mhm.
creators who at some moments can certainly feel like you're working in this silo and like a little
Right.
bubble and, you don't have coworkers. A lot of creators, they're just solopreneurs. They don't have a
Mhm.
team. So to be able to have somebody to riff ideas off of, to have
Right.
someone who can just share what they've experienced in, other scenarios that are comparable to yours, like it's really invaluable to have that.
Yeah. I guess this is one of the main ways in which you help content creators and influencers?
Yeah, so I work rarely with creators directly. Like
Mhm.
like our community predominantly is the people who hire influencers or
Okay.
who advocate for influencers.
Mhm.
But That being said, in 2024, we actually are launching our first membership for
Yeah.
creators. And I really wanted it to be like very like tactical. So
Mhm.
we're starting with casting opportunities and brand partnership opportunities
Mm.
that are going to be shared directly from our professional network
Right.
of WIIM. And we're launching that for creators.
Mhm.
So that's, like, the way that WIM helps creators. I
Mhm.
certainly work with some creators just on, like, a coaching basis,
Yeah.
and it's just, like for me, it's fulfilling, like, it's
Yeah.
fun because it's so similar to what I used to do as a talent
Right.
manager. I
Mm.
love coaching, so I coach managers
Mhm.
as well, but, yeah, the coaching is a small side of my business. It's like a
Yeah.
select few, where I get to really truly do it because it's fun
Right.
to do, and I get to see, like, the fruits of their labor, being able to be growing their business and
Mhm.
everything, but that's how I personally work with creators.
Okay, and I could see in your business that connection that you're gonna be creating between creators and buyers. That'll be a great nexus between those 2. And I know that your organization is women. What are some of the challenges that women face in particular as influencers?
I mean, there's a lot of things, predominantly confidence. I think that that's the thing that I see the
Yeah.
most often where like we're not living in the 1950s. So, like,
Mhm.
most of the women in our group, like, thankfully have been exposed to, women who are breaking boundaries and doing
Mhm.
incredible things. But I think that, some of us get scared of doing the same, of like, well, like, that looks amazing and I
Yeah.
aspire to do that. But, what does that look like in
Right.
practical terms, like in my everyday life, like, can I really risk that? Like, that
Mhm.
seems a little too dangerous. And they're just nervous. And so, the thing that holds a lot of women back,
Mhm.
unfortunately, is themselves. And
Mhm.
so, what we try to do at WIM and what I think we've done really successfully is just created a network of like a support
Hmm.
system. So, when you have those questions, you don't
Right.
have to just wonder if I'm going to like fall on my face. You have like hundreds of people
Right.
who have gone through the same thing, are currently going through the same thing, and can certainly have support for you.
Mm.
Or, in most cases, give you actual, like, practical advice of like,
Right.
here's what to do. I already like messed up. You don't have to make the same mistake. The networking opportunities are huge to just
Mhm.
having partners. There's so many people who, started out at these large agencies or working at the
Right.
big social platforms or working, in house at brands
Mhm.
that have gone off on their own and
Mhm.
started businesses of their own, whether, they're consultants or small businesses or their own agencies. And, it's really exciting to see partnerships between various
Right.
companies happen because you have that strong network of people and you can all work together. So, yeah, that's just one of the many ways I think we overcome some of
Mhm.
those challenges.
I could see that as being so helpful because there is that element of risk in content creation, in putting yourself out there, and to have a support network is very helpful, and also the connections you mentioned, because that's also equally important in any industry, including content creation. And I think again, there's something that sometimes beginner creators will underestimate. They will go that route of like trying to reach these mass audiences through content or going viral, when really a lot of what could help them is making more of a meaningful or a deeper connection with a few people that are kind of in just ahead of them, or in a related space.
Yeah, those
Great.
relationships are, like, invaluable, like, really I mean, I'm a little bit, like, drinking the Kool-Aid, obviously, I own a networking group, but
Hmm.
even before the reason I started it is I've just personally, like,
Right.
firsthand seen the power of networking and of, building your network and knowing people. I'm part of other networking groups
Hmm.
presently, I just joined one, a couple weeks ago that I'm really
Yeah.
excited about, actually, but I just think it's great to, to know people and to broaden your network, broaden your horizons. Like this new community that I joined, like I'm just excited to be in the passenger seat a little bit,
Right.
to be honest, and sit back and like learn from other people who are way more experienced than I am. And so there's lots of benefits to it.
Yeah, definitely. And I've definitely seen that, even people who are creators themselves and might even have a community are also part of communities because of that beneficial aspect to it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think that like they're like business coaches have business coaches.
Right.
It's
Absolutely.
if you really believe it, then you buy into
Yeah.
it fully. And like I just think it like a life well lived is where you're just
Mm.
continuing to learn and grow. So that's what I think at least. I just love like meeting really
Yeah.
smart, like open-minded people and get to learn so much and grow as a person.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about how social media fits into all of this. I saw that you have accounts for Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, the X app, and so on. And what would you say is your main social media platform and why that one?
So it's actually LinkedIn.
Okay.
I'm part of the LinkedIn Creator Program.
Hmm.
I've been incredibly active on it for, years at this point, but creating content there, like as a
Right.
content creator now for at least a couple years at this point.
Hmm.
And there's a whole community there. But again, like
Yeah.
I'm in the B2B business, so it makes
Right.
sense for us to be there. But LinkedIn has grown into this place that
Hmm.
not everybody realizes. It
Right.
is truly its own social media platform, and it's
Hmm.
not what it used to be. So, we have a really big presence on LinkedIn, and I love it. And I also am able to convert business from it,
Right.
which is fantastic. Our podcast is
Hmm.
also a huge place for us. We're sort of in more unique places. The podcast, we've had the podcast now for years, and I
Hmm.
think we're like, I don't know, we're well over 200 episodes. So,
Amazing.
it's its own well-oiled
Hmm.
machine. It's definitely changed over the years, but yeah, the podcast is something that is pretty pivotal to
Right.
our growth as a community. I think like a lot of people both want to be guests on it, but
Yeah.
also, listen to it fairly consistently as
Hmm.
well. So yeah, those are our two biggest platforms.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, a podcast, I think, is one of the harder platforms to grow. So, having been able to grow that is a really great achievement. And yeah, LinkedIn is an interesting option. It's not, I think, used as much by creators because it still maybe has that perception of a business, networking site as opposed to like a content creation site. But at the same time, I've heard good things about it as a platform that has really good organic discovery. And like you say, obviously for business to business sales, there's definitely an advantage to that. So do you with the other platforms, do you kind of see them just as broader extensions, and do you tend to like repost stuff from LinkedIn, or are you creating original content for the other platforms
So,
as well?
our process tends to be that we will create content and then sort of customize it to fit the
Right.
nuances of every platform because
Yeah.
each platform is slightly different.
Mhm.
So, for example, we announced we have our first masterclass of 2024 that we, are promoting today.
Right.
And so, we created a carousel, but then we posted it also to our Instagram story
Mhm.
because we want to link to the, page to RSVP. Then we also, posted on LinkedIn. It looks a little different. And I try
Yeah.
not to actually post this way, but I like how the carousel looked. So on
Right.
LinkedIn, you refer to it as a document instead of
Okay.
a carousel. It's like a PDF version
Yeah.
of it. And, we try to change up the text a little bit
Mhm.
depending on the audience that's there, and then sometimes we'll convert it into a reel, which then is a TikTok and
Right.
also on YouTube Shorts. And, a lot of like we have a newsletter as well. So
Right.
in our newsletter, we usually have like the first section that's sort of like an introductory,
Mhm.
like I want to hook you in type
Right.
section where I try to get a little bit more personal with our
Mhm.
audience sometimes too. And, that usually will get reposted on those do really well on LinkedIn. I'll tell
Mhm.
you, the posts that do the best on LinkedIn are the ones that usually are not about business at all
Hmm.
whatsoever. So it's just like a little bit behind the scenes of what it is as
Right.
a professional, but like more as just a person.
Mm.
And then sometimes I'll convert that into a whole topic on the podcast.
Right.
So I'm really efficient though when it comes to my business. And I'm like a nerd when it comes to creating processes for things. So that's certainly like no different when it comes
Mhm.
to content creation.
Right.
And maybe that's just how my brain works, but like I'll have a seed and then we sort of branch that out and morph it into slightly different ways depending
Yeah.
on where it's posted.
It makes sense. I think that, adaptation is really important because, consumers, viewers nowadays can really tell if something's just straight reposted. It, kind of okay, that's an Instagram post just, repurposed onto Twitter or what have you. It's fairly obvious, and then it kind of decreases engagement because I think the viewer feels like, okay, they didn't even bother to adapt it for this platform. So
Definitely.
so that's really great that you've got that fine tuning in place. And then the thing that we're focusing on this year and in the season of the podcast is YouTube. So how does YouTube fit into the wider plan?
YouTube is a beast. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm a YouTube consumer. So I also
Hmm.
really respect the medium for the most part. What we're producing on there, we're just sharing our podcast on there, but
Yeah.
we've been consistently recording every single podcast on video,
Mm.
editing it,
Right.
video first. So, that goes onto our YouTube. It's a very small, is like practically non-existent channel. But I'm building it because I like watching
Yeah.
podcasts, and it's just another place to meet people and to have people discover us. So we
Hmm.
post on there. When I'm interviewing people, I think
Hmm.
it's nice to be able to sort of look them in the eye and
Yeah.
have that experience as well. So that's another reason why we do it. And then occasionally we were posting pretty consistently on
Hmm.
shorts for a while and was getting some traction too, which
Yeah.
was really interesting, but very little conversions. So
Mm.
I'm still trying to figure out how YouTube works for us.
Hmm.
I've definitely seen some other people in the B2B space, though, kill it on
Yeah.
YouTube. There's a lawyer who I know who specializes in, all things creator
Right.
economy. And, but her videos feel like a YouTube video,
Right.
like it's not just me on a, podcast with
Mm.
very little editing. Like there's a look and a feel to
Sure.
YouTube for the most part. And she embraces that. And
Mm.
that's probably why she's doing significantly better than I am on there. So again, it's a process. There's only also so many hours in the day. And
Yeah.
eventually we'll get there and we'll keep improving. But for now, we're just sort of posting out there and sort of seeing what happens.
Yeah, for sure. Like I definitely agree. YouTube, there's so much to it. It's like a lot of other platforms, and you almost have to be very devoted to it and focused on that in order to grow it. And I feel like it's the same with like Instagram or probably LinkedIn or any kind of other platform. The consistency and knowing the nuances of the platform and producing like primarily for that first all becomes so important. But yeah, I do like the podcast element of YouTube because it's like you say, I think it adds a dimension to a podcast if you can actually see the people, and it's kind of nice. It's a nice additional channel to share podcast content on.
And they're also trying to lean into podcasts as well.
Hmm.
Like they've launched, it's very slow moving, but they've launched some features that are just very
Right.
specifically, for podcasters and for
Hmm.
consumers of podcasters. So I'm excited to sort of see what they continue to
Yeah.
build and if they can sort of attract more people who like then that just means more discoverability for us. I mean,
Yeah.
it's owned by Google. Like people just forget that,
Right.
it's like a Google owned, Alphabet owned company and it's like the second largest search engine. Like so many people just go to YouTube when they're looking for, XYZ topic or an answer to something and they just want to watch it in a
Hmm.
video format. So there's just so many people there and there's so much strategy that
Hmm.
can be implemented. It's just a matter of focusing on it and prioritizing it.
Yeah, and that's a good point. One of the things that's nice is it can be indexed by Google, like your podcast episodes. So
Yep,
that's another side benefit of that. And Shorts, they've started to make some good changes where you can create a clip and then have it the related video that you put the podcast clip on the short can be your long form podcast. So I've
yep,
been trying that a little bit more. It's like everything else. It's very success, but it's nice when you see it working out.
for sure.
Yeah. And then could you tell us a little bit more about specifically your business and how it would help other influencers, people who are content creators, so be interested in getting involved?
Yeah. So, again, our main core business of WIIM is for the people who like power the creator economy in terms of those
Hmm.
who work in agencies and management companies and brands. So if that's you, our core WIIM membership is perfect for you.
Mhm.
If you're a creator, though, keep an eye out because in the very beginning of 2024, we're going to be launching our very first creator membership, which is going to be a Slack community.
Mhm.
And we are going to be posting a ton of casting opportunities and brand partnership opportunities for you there. It's going to be an opportunity to just network with other creators as well. We're going to be sharing, industry news that you
Mhm.
should know about and a lot more to come. And then in addition, I do coaching and it's some work that I'm just really, I love it. I love
Yeah.
working more hands on with creators. So if you're a creator and you're looking to sort of think big picture about like how to, grow, how to, strategically grow your business as a whole, I love working with creators. And that's my consultancy that does that. It's not through WIM, and my consultancy is called Tribe Monday. So that's another way that I can work with creators.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. And thank you for joining me today, Jesse. I really appreciate the chance to talk with you.
Yeah, it's fun. Thanks for having me.
Mhm. So, one of the things that this episode with Jesse got me thinking about is the importance of a niche focus for a YouTube channel. Now, I know this is a topic that is talked about frequently as it relates to content creation, but I think that many creators still struggle with how to define their niche in a way that makes sense for monetization because they're approaching it the wrong way. For example, a lot of creators will think about their niche as a topic. They'll say, like, I'm interested in YouTube, so my niche is everything about YouTube. The problem with this approach is that it's not really very compelling, in the sense that it doesn't really differentiate you from the many other channels out there offering similar advice about YouTube. You've got to go deeper than that, and I think what Jessie has done with her business and her content offers an important clue about how to do it. If we think about it, Jessie didn't start with a topic. She started with the skill sets that she had, thought about what she was passionate about and what there was a market demand for, and then combined those three things together to offer a distinctive solution to the market. So we can replicate this ourselves by starting with what we're good at, or at least have the potential to become good at, because if you want to start charging people money for this product or service, it's got to be something that creates value for them. And of course, the more value that we create, the more we can charge for a product or service. So we'll start with a list of skills, and then on that list, identify the things that you're most passionate about. I mean, if you're a whiz with accounting software, but you're not interested in talking about accounting outside of work, then that's probably not the topic for your YouTube channel because it's not going to be sustainable over the longer term. But let's say you're also good with business strategy and you like talking about strategy. Now we've got a little bit more to work with. The last step is to think about what there's a market for in terms of what types of people out there have problems you could provide a solution for. Hanging with the idea of YouTube and business strategy, you could say that you're going to help people monetize their YouTube channels. That's better than YouTube in general, but it's still not very distinctive or compelling. This is where we got to go yet one more level deeper. And this is where you got to start thinking about what specific kind of insights and solutions you could offer based on your specific experience and your circumstances. I went through this process with my own channel, and that's when I realized that I could have something to offer for other people who are also part time content creators who are looking to grow their audience. And I think this has potential because I know there are a lot of other people who are in similar circumstances of creating content part time and facing all the challenges that go along with that. I also know and understand those challenges very well because I'm facing them myself. So as a result, as I'm solving these problems for myself as a part-time creator, these solutions should be of interest to other creators in similar circumstances. So if you're struggling with this as well, that's how I'd recommend approaching it. Skill sets, interests, and solutions, and then put that all together and see what you've got. Like Jesse said, you don't have to have this all mapped out on day one. It's probably going to be a process as you refine and evolve things over time. And if you're a woman who is looking to work in influencer marketing, then you can find mentorship and other resources on Jesse's website, which can help you work through this challenge and others that you'll face as a content creator. I've added a link to that website in my description, and I've also added a link to my audience avatar template, which can help you define your target audience as content creator. Check it out, and if you found this helpful, consider subscribing. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.